Welcome to Momma-Sota, the podcast where we dive headfirst into the beautiful mess of motherhood. I'm your host, Monica Eickman, and I'm here to keep it real. In a world that changes by the minute, parenting can often feel like an uphill battle. We all want what's best for our children, but what that best looks like varies for every one of us. Momma-Sota is your passport to the unfiltered, unapologetic world of mommy. No perfectly edited snapshots or unattainable ideals here. We're here to share the ups and downs, the triumphs and tantrums, the mess and the beauty of being a mom. Join me as we explore the raw and authentic side of parenting. This is your safe space to vent, laugh, and learn as we navigate the unpredictable journey of raising strong, capable, and independent children for the future. Hey mamas, welcome to today's episode of Mommasota. It's me, your host, Monica Eickman. I am a stay-at-home mom to my favorite 3 children in the world. My son Malachi is in 2nd grade, and my girls, 4.5 and 2 years old, are home with me. I couldn't imagine having to ever enroll my kids into daycare, but for many families, that is the reality. Lucky for them, there are so many fantastic options out there that are always striving to offer new and innovative care. Joining us today is special guest Amy Steiner. She is an early childhood educator with a passion for puppetry, art, and festive activities. Amy is also the co-founder of Childcare, as well as the host of her own parenting podcast. Welcome, Amy, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here with you today. I geek out about all of this stuff, so I can't wait to get going.
Fantastic. Well, we'll definitely have plenty of stuff to geek out over because I'm the same way. It's exactly why I'm doing this, because I just talk about everything being a mom. But before we kind of jump into those different pieces of things, tell us more about yourself and your family.
Sure. Well, I have 2 boys. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we live a little bit out into the kind of rural area of Ham Lake, and we absolutely love being outside and camping and fishing and doing activities as a family. We kind of are a family unit, and my husband definitely can keep up with the boys better than I do. Sometimes I'm quite outnumbered when it comes to that. But yeah, we have a loud and rowdy house, but it's always a good time over in our neck of the woods. And my sister and I co-own a daycare, like you mentioned. We've got some different locations in the northern side of the Twin Cities, so the suburbs. And I've been in childcare since 2009. It was my first official job. I had volunteered and been a part of different things for a lot longer than that, but that's when I got my first job, and I thought it was going to be temporary, just a summer gig, and then it turned into this lifelong passion of mine. So kind of fell head over heels into it, and here I am. So I found a space to geek out, and where it was finally appropriate to talk about puppetry and finger paints and all that. You know, those are not really skills that you get a lot of time to brag about. So I found the right career for me.
So then prior to the childcare, where did your background, where were you at with everything? Like you said, you're talking about puppetry and finger painting.
Yeah. So honestly, most of that was coming out of a hobby place in my heart, where I, through different introductions, whether it was from my sister or my mom or my grandma, just had a bunch of different creative moments with so many different people. And that's kind of where the love of some of those things came out. Cooking, all those fun things. And then I went to school to be an X-ray tech. And that feels a little bit out of left field because it obviously doesn't tie into anything that I'm doing now. But I knew I loved working with people, and I wasn't too shabby with technology. So it was kind of the place that I thought was going to be it for me. And it wasn't. It just wasn't a good match. In fact, the first childcare job I took, it was just temporary for the summer because I was still pursuing that career. And then 3 months into it, I was like, no, forget X-ray. I'm going to stay with the kiddos. So, yeah.
And so then how did that evolve from, you were working like in a daycare center or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got thrown into the 3-year-old classroom, and that was quite an experience for me. Not really having a ton of experience of all day with children, and also navigating as a group. A lot of my experience was more one-on-one or small groups, but having 21 3-year-olds in a classroom was a bit of a shock to the system. And so I learned a ton right off the bat because you kind of had to, honestly.
For sure, yeah. And then where did the transition from working in the daycare center to starting your own childcare come?
That is a good question. So I was one of the lucky ones who got to be in amazing daycare right off the bat. I got to learn and observe and be a part of a team that was so healthy. That company was just a profound impact to my life. So honestly, most of that time that I was there with them, I think it was right around 9 years that I was with them, I really thought I was a lifer. I really didn't think I would be doing this anywhere else. And my sister is very much a dreamer, and I knew she had always wanted to open a daycare. So some of those conversations started bubbling up back in like 2015. And at that point, still very much loving my job. So that's just kind of where it stayed. And then as time went, it was kind of like, well, if you open a daycare, then I will help you. Or if you open a daycare, I'll work for you. And then eventually my tune changed to, yeah, I want to do this with you. And it was such a hard decision because I adored the company I was with, but they also gave me the confidence and the tool sets to be able to walk with confidence into that next stage. And then I started having my own kids, and I didn't want to drive into downtown Minneapolis anymore, and I wanted to have a little bit more control over the setting that my children were in. And unfortunately, I didn't have the financial opportunity to be able to stay home with them. So I think that was kind of the nudge. The mom lens was the nudge that pushed me into, okay, let's do this,
And that's kind of where I was at with where, in my intro where I said, like, I never dreamed of having to put my kids in daycare, but the reality for a lot of families is their kids have to go to daycare. And I grew up, my mom did in-home daycare. So it's like,
okay,
I know, there's fantastic things out there. And so just having different options, and with childcare, like you said, you worked at a fantastic daycare and you still wanted a different, different choice for your kids. So it's just interesting how that all kind of comes around.
Well, and you don't realize some of those things until you are a parent. You can obviously be a great caregiver in whatever field you choose that's caregiving without being a parent, but it was just a new facet of light that just came into my brain, and it was like, oh, okay, maybe I do want to change. And it wasn't at all because of any weaknesses or anything that was falling through the cracks. It just was out of a new desire to do something different. And I think it just gave me that courage. But yeah, both my sister and I, as daycare owners, we quite often chuckle because we both agreed that children staying home with their parents is by far the best option. Early childhood really is such a beautiful thing within the home. And in-home daycares, again, are another amazing option if you can find that good person who can be accountable and who matches your family's needs. And so it's a little ironic that we are owning centers, but we also could see that, good but still affordable childcare is so deeply needed. And we wanted to take a crack at it. So, yeah.
Well, and like you said, too, it's not, the staying home isn't the option for everyone. So then in your head, it seems like, like, what is the next best option that I can provide now?
Yeah. Yes. That's exactly right. Yep.
And so at Compass Childcare, some of the programs and things that you guys offer is high in art, dramatic play, sensory experiences, STEM activities. What are some of those other things I might be missing or that set you guys apart?
Sure. Well, we have enrichment programs that we have that are outside resources that come to the schools. And so we have some sport-focused ones so that parents who maybe want to introduce their child to soccer but don't want to lose every Thursday night to soccer after a long work day, they can know that their child's getting that experience of sports and the at least the introductions to it. So we have a sport class that comes. We've got dance and music that are two separate enrichment programs that come. We've got a yoga instructor that comes as well, so that we can just, it's such a beautiful age because they, their brains light up, and you can definitely tell when their personalities are like, yes, I love this. I don't like the dance so much. So it's really fun to watch their personalities kind of figure out what they like and dislike. But this is the time of life to introduce as many things as we can. And so, yeah, we do the enrichment programs. We're currently working with a program called St. David's. They're actually down in Minnetonka, I believe, and they're all about inclusion. And so they're helping us consult with supporting our educators better so that we can be more inclusive, and for it to be this beautiful symbiotic thing where staff have more confidence in being inclusive with children with different needs, elevated needs, and all of the children benefit from that. And so that's something that we're really excited and working on right now. So that'll be more of a future thing to look forward to. But I could talk all day about it, but those are just some of the fun things that we're doing. And all of those extra enrichment programs are already included in the tuition prices that you get. So it's not an additional fee to our parents. It's included.
That I was going to say, that was where I was going to go next. I was going to say, is it something where the parents have to like pick and choose what they sign their kids up for within the day, or is it all just kind of part of the curriculum that you flow through?
It's all a part of that curriculum. Yeah.
Excellent. So let's talk more about, because you've mentioned it a couple times, it's part of everything, it's your interest. Let's talk more about the puppetry.
Okay. I love puppetry. It was one of those things that you don't even realize you like it. It's not really a common hobby for sure. And I'm of an age where puppetry was probably far more common when I was younger. I mean, even the TV shows were mostly puppets. So it was always kind of a spark to me. But yeah, it's I always laugh about it just because it is not something that I usually put in my bio or let people know about me. It's not a shame thing. It's just kind of a goofy, silly thing. But I remember the first time I used a puppet in the classroom, and it was just this beautiful moment. And I never put them down. I never wanted to go back to not using them.
So I think sometimes, I mean, it's something that I've come back to in different ways, even just on the podcast here, but like technology is fantastic. And we have so many, advancements and things that come from technology. But I think sometimes then we forget the simple things in life.
Oh, yeah.
And herein lies that exact example is, like you said, puppetry. Like we can all have access to that sort of thing when sometimes we don't have access to different technology pieces.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And let me tell you, anything can be a puppet. If you're at the restaurant and you're fresh out of puppets, you could grab a spoon, and that spoon could be your puppet for that moment. But yeah, I think what the beautiful thing about puppetry is, in and of itself, it is a little bit of a storytelling moment. And when you get to do that, there's kind of that face-to-face interaction where you're looking at your child's face, and the delight and the silliness and the joy that's there is just this constant, instant feedback to you as the parent. And puppets are so silly and just that much wacky that a child who's grumpy or starting to, pitch a fit or starting to communicate that they're really struggling with something, sometimes grabbing that stuffed animal that's really close to you and putting on a wacky voice and asking them a question is enough of a surprise. It kind of jars their brain a little bit to then make that toddler laugh or get kind of that smirk out of the side of their mouth. And then you got them. Then you know that you can continue and kind of redirect some of those big emotions, which is fun. But then when they get a little older, it is so fun to have them do their own puppet voices. Or sometimes kids don't want to talk about their emotions, even if they had the words to it, but give them a puppet and all of a sudden they're ready to talk about it. The puppet can be their voice.
I like that too, when you talked about like the puppet being a way to like snap a kid out of that anger or whatever big feeling or emotion they're going through. Because I've talked with other moms on behavior, and one of the things was just like that distraction tactic, and it was even just like ask them a silly question that is like, or make a silly statement that is not true, but
Yeah.
that they can't help then but like correct it and engage with you. So it's kind of
Hmm.
that same
Oh yeah.
same thing.
Yep. Same thing. And I don't think that many people actually, you probably already do have a puppet in your house. I know that through the gifts and the gift shops at the zoos and all of that, but we certainly have had our fill of different random puppets that get into our house. But I understand most parents probably don't have this huge supply of puppets. And so, making one could also be a really fun activity for you to do with your kiddo. And there's a million tutorials on how to do that out there. And you can just use a sock. Obviously, we've done that. Probably most of us have done that as a child, but also sometimes just a bare hand or just a random stuffed animal. Although the mouth isn't moving, it doesn't really matter because they obviously can still see that your mouth is moving. They know that voice is coming from you, but there's just something a little bit magical about it being from a goofy, puppet.
I like to, and I didn't even think about, but we've talked about here already with puppetry as far as like, one, it's like a storytelling avenue. Two, it's that fun, goofy, silly, bringing out the child in the adult. And then, like you said, the joy you see in the kids' face, it being used as art and craft side when you go through the creation. So even just in like this little bit, there's so many pieces and facets to the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, you can go so many different ways, and it is just a lot of fun. I think honestly, we're all born with the same language. It is crying, and there is a point where that sometimes pivots a little bit and they're still crying, but there's this deep connection to silliness. And we forget about it as parents sometimes. And we forget about it because we're busy and nothing. Sometimes we are dealing with very non-silly things and we're dealing with bills and we're dealing with work stress and we forget to be silly. And in those moments, that's also a hidden benefit is that you get to be silly and you get to have that moment with your child and all of a sudden you're laughing too and things just clarify a little bit. It's just fun to sometimes forget to be serious and to be a little wacky because I think we all need that.
Definitely, there's a time when I don't know when it like switches or flips, and maybe it's at like 18 when we're called an adult, but there's so much pressure to like be a grown up and act like an adult, and it's like, well, why does that mean that like I can't be fun and silly? Like where's
Yeah,
that line drawn?
I don't know. I think it must have to do with when shame kicks in or not wanting to be, don't look at me. I don't want to be considered weird. It must be along that lines of when we're all of a sudden concerned what other people think of us, which is such a sad thing. But yeah, the silliness. My boys always want to be 1 year older, because it's always like, hey, I'm
Yep.
7.5. Don't forget that half point.
Those halves, yeah.
Yeah, and I just keep telling them, you just slow down, just enjoy this moment right here. I know that being an adult looks really fun, because we get to do whatever you think is really fun, but just slow down.
So another big piece then would be like the art, and what we kind of talked about too specifically with that is like the festive activities.
Yeah, these are some things that I found so easily done in my classroom, but getting home and doing them all of a sudden became really difficult. And I don't know what that is about. I don't
Mhm.
know. It probably has to do with the cleaning of the house and picking up the yard and doing the laundry and whatever. But when you can do some art or celebrate the small moments. Hey, today's Tuesday. My son has science class on Thursdays, and sometimes Thursdays are a little rough because although he loves science and everything about nature, that class goes a little rough for him. And sitting and being respectful and quiet is super hard in that class. So we celebrate Thursdays. I think sometimes that festivity to celebrate any moment is, again, another opportunity to bring a lighthearted side to things. And honestly, we all know life is so short, but life is so short. Like, let's celebrate with being festive. Let's turn the milk green on St. Patrick's Day. Let's make those little sparks of memories that they will carry on for the rest of their life. And I think that's one of my favorite things to hear from people, of like listening to you talk about a memory that you had, something that maybe your parents or grandparents or somebody did for you. But yeah, I think, we could definitely talk about some very easy ways to make different things seem more special. And art is always something that in my brain, because I'm so artistic, this makes my brain shut off. Like, it just brings the humming noise down and I can just zone out. And sometimes I don't want to bring out the paints or the paper or the glue sticks. Sometimes I don't really want to go and set that up. So sometimes it is, you got to do something that you don't really want to do. Or if you're like me, you can just kind of have a little art area set up on your kitchen counter where you can just pull it out of the cupboard or have it kind of pre-set up in a little caddy. There's so many cool organizers and little bins and caddies out there right now that you could make it easier for yourself to pull out some of the art things. But even my very busy boys do like to sit down and do some art. So
yeah, and so a couple things with the art is, in talking to different moms that I know, definitely if they're like anti-art, there's two big barriers that I find. One is the mess or potential mess terrifies them.
Yeah.
Or two, or is not considering, and I've talked to another mom on the show about this, is not considering themselves good at art or like being an artist. And we automatically go to like drawing. So what would you say, or what advice would you give to kind of like those barriers to break those down?
Well, and those are legitimate barriers. The first one reminds me of my sister. My sister does not like the messy side of it, doesn't like the glitter, no glitter allowed, because it will be in her carpet for, 3 years. So that is totally a legitimate barrier. I think acknowledging that, like being self-aware and acknowledging that, is step one. And figuring out why. Is it a time issue? Is it as adults, we legitimately have sensory issues ourselves. So is it more of a sensory issue for you where you just can't stand it? So figuring out more about why do you feel that way, or why is that a barrier, would be probably my first go-to. And then I would move forward with some problem solving on the actual barrier. So if it is a mess thing, and then I would say go do art outside. And it doesn't have to be always breaking out the same materials. It could take your sidewalk chalk, take the rocks that you found in your toddler's pockets, because they all love to collect rocks. Go outside, have them, color with the chalk, and then give them a cup of water and a paintbrush, and then they can do like a almost resistance painting where they're removing then the chalk off the rock. But all the mess is outside. The true mess is just chalk dust, and you're doing it in an area where maybe it's a little bit more easy for you to get past that barrier because the mess is outside. That, I think that even in the winter, if you are in an area where obviously it's cold 6 months of the year, that becomes a little bit more difficult. Yeah. It becomes a little more difficult. But I do think that incorporating the snow then, and maybe you've got food coloring in water in a spray bottle, and now they're going to go spray the snow different colors. There's so many ways that you could get past the not wanting to make a mess in your house. But if it is a sensory issue, then I would look into other materials or other things that would jive more with what you can do. It doesn't always have to be messy, icky, sticky stuff. Art can be anything. And, giving kiddos an opportunity to experience all of that is so powerful in their brain development and the milestones that they're reaching. And so I would strongly encourage the pursuit of it. I do understand the barriers to it 100% though.
That's funny because you said your sister's, the the art opposed, the messy opposed. My
Mhm.
sister-in-law, I was just having a conversation with her, and she's very much that same way. They don't, there's
Mhm.
no Play-Doh or anything in the house like that.
Yep.
And my other sister-in-law went to babysit, and she said, "Oh, I brought over finger paint for the kids." I could just see the faces and like the whole
Yes.
thing. I was like, "Oh
The
my gosh, this
fear.
is awesome."
Yeah. Yeah, well, and you know what? That's actually a really good point too. Is maybe it's not your thing. Maybe you find the auntie, the friend, the somebody who could come over and do that with your kid, or better yet, send them to their house and get their art fix over there. I actually did that for my sister because she was not about like pumpkin carving or getting the pumpkin guts all out of the pumpkins. So every year I just had, I didn't have kids of my own, so I went and did pumpkin carving with my niece and nephews, and it was a good match. So maybe that's another great idea of going outside of your own talents and capacity and finding someone else. But the feeling of not being an artist, that breaks my heart. I don't know if maybe it was already said, but there's a Picasso quote that says essentially, I'm going to not say it word for word because I can't remember it, but essentially it's saying that every child is born an artist. And the real skill or the real hope is that they hang on to that as they grow up. And I do think I won't get my soapbox out, but I do think there's something about the school system or there's something about art in the elementary ages where it changes from this thing that everybody loves from 0 to 5. Everybody loves art. There's not a single student who's too nervous to really try it. You get some of those kiddos who are already perfectionists and they're already pretty rigid on what they think a success is in art.
Yeah,
And
that's my 7-year-old.
yeah, you might have a few of them who want to kind of shut down a little bit, but it's overall a pretty accepted thing, and they have the curiosity and the courage to try. And then they get older, and somewhere in our lines of whatever, I think it has to do with seeing other people do art and you find their art so amazing. And instead of
Mhm.
being inspired by it and letting it live there, it kind of becomes that, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I must not be good at it. And it's like, well, maybe you're not good at watercolor. And maybe you're better with clay, or maybe you hate clay and you're actually better with graphic design. There's just so many different things that I truly think everybody is good at something in the artistic world, because I think we were truly made to be creative.
That is something that I've talked about, is like we're taught out of creativity as
Mm-hmm.
we grow, and everything's put into these boxes, how things, have to be. And it's just like you said, that's sad because
Yeah.
I look at, even just artists that do paint or draw when we're talking about them. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, outside of that, now we have impressionist art and we have realism and we have, it's
Yeah.
just like, well, look at all those different styles that do not match whatsoever.
Yeah. Yep.
And so then another piece too that you guys incorporate at Compass Childcare is the STEM activities. So what does that look like?
All right. So this is where some of the magic falls off. STEM is a bit of a buzzword. Let's be honest. It really is. Some people add the A of art into STEM and call it STEAM.
Mhm.
And anytime we can get those exploration pieces in front of kiddos and we're more interested in them as adults, I'm all for it. So we'll call it STEM, we'll call it whatever we need to. But STEM, obviously I feel like we really understand the bookends, the S and the M. We know science, we know math. And then we think, okay, well, how does a 2-year-old do science and math? And so I think that's a layer that parents are often unaware of, or that's where some of the magical thoughts of like, wow, they're teaching my kid science. But I promise all of you are doing science at home with whatever you're doing. So like math for a younger child is certainly has nothing to do with numbers. It's more about, talking about the sizing of different things, small, medium, large, categorizing things, putting things in groups by comparison to size or shape or all that. When toddlers are learning their shapes and that vocabulary is kicking in. That's another form of, yes, vocabulary, but also math. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff where we've always been teaching kids these things, but now we get to call it something cool like STEM. Science is all about, having questions and testing them out and then documenting it, right? Because if you learned anything from the Mythbusters show back in the day, if you don't document, it's just screwing around. So we gotta document. And so kind of teaching kiddos, we don't have to teach children how to ask questions. Typically, they have a lot of questions.
They've got plenty of questions.
And so one of the coolest things about doing this at home is there's no agenda necessarily that you are forced to follow. And so if you have a child who's super curious about bugs or grasshoppers, cool, let's dive into that. All of their questions are about the same exact thing. Let's leverage that and move into that area so that we can already use something that is a spark in their brain and just open it wide open for them. So that's kind of the fun things about STEM. Technology and engineering, I know a lot of times when we think about technology, we just think about screen time and that kind of a thing, but really technology and engineering go hand in hand. And it's again about identifying a question, or maybe a better word would be like a problem, and then how are we going to fix that problem, and how are we going to build or create something to solve that problem. And oops, our tower of blocks fell apart, so how can we make our block tower more stable? We can make the base a little wider, or we can use a different material than the wooden blocks, and now we're going to use Legos that actually really connect to each other. So you're already doing STEM at home. I promise everyone they are. It's just a little bit of the term seems to be mystical in some way, and it's not.
I like too that you bring focus to, and everyone to remember that technology, like you said, doesn't automatically mean screen times. I think we equate technology with electronics.
Yes.
And it's they used to, write by dipping a feather into ink, and now we have pens and pencils and markers. And that's amazing technological advancement, and none of that has to do with electronics.
Exactly. Yes, you're spot on. And then how cool would that be for them to, go to the dollar store, get a bag of feathers and dip it in and do that at home? That's such a great idea.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that would be really fun.
What are other activities then that you would say to moms that are a good way to just to spark some curiosity and exploration at home?
I think so. Something that I say over and over again when I'm working with educators and I'm working with curriculum is a lot of times it feels like too much work. It feels like the prep and all that is too cumbersome. I would rather just do XYZ. And I promise that just the small investment into the pre-work will make the whole rest of the day or the whole rest of the project go that much further when you're talking about in the classroom. And the other part about curriculum for our educators that is, in my opinion, an advantage is that, it keeps the kids engaged, but really curriculum ties it back to the adult, and now the adult has a focus and they're more engaged. And so if I were doing this at home, I would focus on, like we already said, what engages your child, what interests do they already have, but just alongside that, as a parent, what interests you? What are something that you find pretty incredible? What is something that you have a lot of questions about? And then jumping into your own interests, but introducing them to your child at the same time would be kind of the route that I would go, because you're going to have already a leg up then on it being something that lasts, something that you do over and over and over again, because sometimes longevity becomes the issue where you're like, man, that week we really nailed science, and then we never did it again. So continually either finding those things that just keep you kind of interested, but nature walks will always be the best place to look at science. And then when you're there, it's like, okay, well, what can what could we put together with rocks? Oh, look, this stick makes this rock. When I put the rock on top of the stick, I can now move that heavy rock because I'm rolling the stick. So I think you being creative and you being curious is already the first step. And then sometimes it's just getting outside. And if you're not an outside person, there's obviously a lot of things inside that you could be looking at too. Food and cooking is essentially science, and combining different ingredients and making your own applesauce to help children understand that apple that grew on the tree is essentially what's in their little pouch, and that is breaking the bank because you have to keep buying those pouches. Instead, get your crock pot out, get your apples out, and make applesauce with your kiddo. So kind of taking those opportunities to show them, food to table is a whole nother, part of science that would be another avenue that you could jump into if you're more of a chef and you're more interested in that. Or maybe you couldn't care about cooking, but you got to do it. So you're going to kill two birds with one stone. And while we make lunch today, we're going to, throw some science in there. So it could be simple things. You could use art and have that lead right into some of the STEM stuff, because you can count different things. You can if you're drawing, your child's drawing a face, you could talk about, do the eyes go above or below the nose? Like looking at that not only is that STEM, that's actually pre-literacy skills too. So all of those simple things you can just keep doing, but maybe just the switch that you make is asking more questions and having them ponder. And obviously that's for the 3, 4, 5, the older kiddos. For those toddlers and infants, it's merely just introducing them and letting them get their hands in there is more what that age range is looking for.
Well, I love that everything too that we're like mentioning here and talking about is, it doesn't have to be a big, extravagant, I'm going to, paper mache a volcano and then create this
Yes.
explosion, and in order for my
Yes.
kid to have a science experiment or a learning opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Which would
And
be
it's
really
just
cool.
yeah.
It'd be
But it's
really
just like
cool
you
to do
said,
that.
all these resources are at our fingertips, like you said, in the kitchen
Yeah.
or out in nature. You don't need to go buy all these supplies.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So with kind of some of that, another big piece of childhood in general is just play. So with that, both in the classroom and like at home, and then in your background again too, is kind of like the dramatic play side of things.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Dramatic play is so profound in child development and in brain development. And in general, play is their work. And I think we understand that to some degree. Right now in my field, there's a bit of a tug of war where we've got some parents who are looking for that kindergarten readiness, that cognitive academic focus. They want their children to be reading and spelling words and having vocabulary lessons, and that's their idea of kindergarten readiness. And now there's a new movement of free play. We need to let our children free play. We shouldn't be forcing kindergarten readiness too soon. And so when you're trying to meet the needs of a lot of different beliefs and ideas, there's a bit of a tug of war right now that we're working with. Free play in general, if facilitated correctly in the classroom, is by far the best way to go. But free play doesn't always mean just go, pull anything off the shelf and tear apart the room. So when you think about bringing that into your home and that makes you afraid because you're like, oh my gosh, dramatic play, I don't want that. I don't want that big mess. I don't even have a kitchen set. I don't know how, I don't have the finances to go and buy the Little Tykes Playhouse or whatever you might think dramatic play is. Dramatic play is, again, so multifaceted that playing with ponies or Barbies or Paw Patrol guys, all of that is technically considered dramatic play because the child is pretending and using that muscle while they're doing it. And so when you're giving them that space, what I would do is just kind of watch and see what they do initially. you might have a child who's really drawn to the fake food and the little plates, and they're really drawn to setting the table. And what I would do in that, my 4-year-old is that kid, and he really likes playing restaurant. And so we, as I think most parents, have a ton of plastic dishes because in the toddler stage, you don't want them busting all of your nice stuff up. So you could take the stuff that you already are using out of the cupboard, and you could sit at your own kitchen table and pretend to be a customer. And you could make it into a thing where maybe you go online and you print off a fake menu that you find, or if you don't have a printer, because who has printers at home anymore, maybe you just write up your own little menu with them and ask them, mac and cheese, okay, we're putting that on the menu. Chicken nuggets, yeah, it's on the menu. And then you can have kind of that engagement and just play. And the funny thing about it is that when you're playing with them, you're really introducing different social interaction with them. And if you pretend to be the disgruntled client who's very mad that their mac and cheese has a hair in it, it gives them that silliness, but it also helps them understand how to, how to bridge through some of those things as they get older. And the other part about it is when you sit back and you watch at first, and then you kind of join them, or sometimes you don't even need to talk to them. Maybe you just sit next to them and are just mimicking what they're doing. That helps, because sometimes we come in and we jar it. We try to take it over. And in dramatic play, it's a great time to let the child lead and you kind of follow a little bit. But I mean, with with some parameters, sometimes you get stuck into a weird thing there where the child's bossing you around. You're like, wait a second, I shouldn't be treated like this. So keeping an eye on that, obviously, but following their lead in what they're already doing, because they're already masters at dramatic play. It is all they want to do, because that's just what their brains are all about right now. So dramatic play can be anything,
Yeah, no.
but
Yeah, that was the
letting them lead and show you a little bit of what they want to do is really important.
No, that was a big piece of what I was going to say is if you just take their lead, like their creative little minds,
Yes.
so profound. I said to my husband the other day, I don't remember what my daughter, I went upstairs to check on her because she was supposed to be brushing her teeth and come down with her pajamas, and it was like 10 minutes gone by. So I go upstairs and I just stand in the hallway and watch. And in that time, she like opens her drawer where her toothbrush and toothpaste is and looks inside and closes it, and then looks in the mirror and does something else, and then opens her drawer and looks again, and then she starts playing with something else, and then she looks in her drawer again. And finally I'm like, honey, what are you doing? But I said to my husband, I was like, what I wouldn't do to like listen to the narration inside of her brain.
Right. Yeah. I
And so
think,
like when they're playing, like that's your opportunity.
oh, it totally is. On both that really fun and like knowing your child better way, but also they will tell you a whole lot about what they're thinking when you let them be the parent, or you let them be the teacher, or you let them be, the cashier. They say stuff that sometimes is like, oh, do I sound like that when I'm being mommy? Because I had a student who was pretending to do our group time or circle time, and they were like pretending to be really upset with those stuffed animals because they were not sitting crisscross applesauce. And it was all of a sudden a little window into my own brain. I'm like, oh, I'm not, am I like that? Is my expectation that harsh? And then we just laughed because no, it wasn't. But sometimes you get a little glimpse into their brain because they can, act out what they feel is happening. And sometimes that's not fun. Sometimes that's like, oh shoot, okay, I can dial that back a little.
Right? So you're like, oh, it's a glimpse into how you view me. Okay.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. No, I think dramatic play is so easily done and so fun. And you can do it with no choice at all. Like it's one of those things where you could be waiting in line at the bank or wherever you are, and you could get into some shenanigans there too. So
So, shifting focus then a little bit, let's talk about your podcast here.
Yeah. So we I am a rookie. I am taking lots of notes from you, Monica, because I'm loving how all of this is going, and I need the advice. But we're kicking off, and essentially the two audience members that I am trying to meet are both parents and then the educators that are in the classroom, and a bigger goal of then connecting those two sides, because that connection is so amazing and it benefits every single child that has both parents and educators connected. And the parents who are at home with their children who want to bring some of the school side to home, and the educators who want to learn how to bring some of the parenting things at home to school. Like, it just feels like a really good back and forth. And so that's kind of our goal. It's called The Dumbest One Here. And in no way is that meant to be, self sabotage or calling myself dumb. But it's kind of out of that pursuit of always wanting to be learning. I am an addicted learner. I don't necessarily love school, and like, I'm not going to just keep pursuing different degrees in college because I love learning. But I feel like I approach almost everything with just a ton of questions and am very curious. And so I was in a meeting with someone and they mentioned they loved being the dumbest person in the room. And it, like, all of a sudden just put into words something that I have known my whole life. And it was like, oh my gosh, you don't even need to explain that. I totally know what you mean. That is me. And so the whole point of calling it that is I'm finding guests who are experts in the field of early childhood education and in parent support, and then bringing them on and drilling them with all my questions. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And we'll be on both YouTube and Spotify, and we're actually kicking off on September 20th. So
Tomorrow.
yes.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was one of those things that has been, I'm a bit of a crackpot. I I really need to stew on something for a long time before I'm ready to pull the trigger. And I wish I wasn't. I kind of don't like that part of me. It certainly has its assets, I'm sure, but it's been like 2 or 3 years in the making, and it's just something that has never left my mind. It's something that just keeps pressing on my heart, and I'm like, that means I really need to get this out there. So yeah, we've got, I think, 5 episodes ready to go, and we're going to release them in both locations. So it'll be fun to keep talking to people like yourself and finding other people who can both give me a moment selfishly and then being able to share that with anybody who's interested.
But that's really what it's all about. I mean, that's the same thing that I find with doing my podcast and social media presence with Momma-Sota, is having the opportunity to share my experiences, my knowledge, whatever I learn along the way, but then also having those connections to continue to learn from.
Yeah. Well, and the old saying about, raising children in a village, many people find themselves villageless. And we're in an age of parenting where a lot of the trust is gone, where we don't really trust our neighbor to watch our kids. We don't trust, we're so aware that bad things can happen. And so I think our circles are just that much tighter. Also, not to mention, a lot of parents are trying to break bad cycles, and they're breaking away from how they were raised, and they were, so then they maybe feel a little bit more cautious about letting the grandparents as a part of life and taking advice. And so then we kind of feel isolated. And I feel like if we can get resources out in a podcast, and the village can be kind of at least somewhat supported in a very small way there, then let's do it. Let's share it, because there's nothing that I would want more than to help another parent, another mom, because this is the hardest thing we've ever done. And nobody has the book. Nobody knows what we're doing.
How many books or manuals there are, there's always something different.
is always something different. And there's so many different voices, and you can find an article that says this is okay, and the very next article saying that same thing is not okay. So it's just a really swirly whirly time, and it's hard to know your navigation points. It's hard to know you're headed in the right direction sometimes. And so through being in the field that I have been, we've gotten amazing contacts and a network of people who just, it's like, wow, you've really got it right. And when I try that in my own home or in my classroom, it's making this profound difference. And so it just started feeling a little bit selfish on my end to be like, I have all these amazing people. And the podcast is a small way to get that out and let other people in on some of that great stuff that I've been learning over the past, 15 years.
So, Amy, before we go here, if you could take one piece of advice, no matter what it is, related to what we've talked about today or something completely different, to tell any mamas listening today, what would that be?
I would tell them that you can't do it all. Oh, I didn't think I was going to get emotional. Wow. You hit me with that one, and that's such a profound question. You can't do it all. And I think we're all trying to do as much of it all as we can. And I just think there might be a mom right now who in their vehicle while driving, they're not even just driving now, they might be listening to a podcast right now. They might be listening to a podcast in the shower where it's like, woo, just give yourself 2 minutes of a quiet time in the shower. Take care of yourself as a mom. And self-care isn't selfish, and you can't do it all. And so there's going to be seasons where you can do different things. There's going to be seasons where you can't, and that's okay. And your children don't need it all. And so to get away from perfectionism, to get away from those things, but to stay curious and stay inspired. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and that couldn't lean into more perfectly what we always sign off with is, until next time, mamas, keep doing your best.
Amazing.
Thank you for joining me on this roller coaster of momming right here on Momma-Sota. I hope you enjoyed our candid conversation about all things parenting, where perfection is left at the door and real life takes center stage. Stay tuned for more heartfelt, unfiltered discussions in the next episode. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review Momma-Sota on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. Until next time, this is Monica Eickman signing off. Keep rocking that mom life, and remember, you've got this.